Hi everyone, today we're doing a Renoir master study. I'm going to be working from back to front, and I've actually gone ahead and put in the background and a little bit of head placement. Three things I learned while doing this master study with Renoir are that pink hues can work really well in a portrait. The second thing I learned is Renoir used a lot of yellow in his flesh mixtures. The third thing I learned is as you move away from the focal point, and here it's the eyes, let the painting get even more sketchy, more painterly, and out of focus. Renoir was a French painter and one of the artists who helped develop the Impressionistic style. During the 1860s, Renoir did struggle, and at times he didn't even have enough money to buy paint. After a series of rejections by salon jurors, Renoir joined forces with other Impressionistic artists and started the first Impressionist exhibition, and that was in April of 1874. So it appears that Renoir was a bit of a rebel.
All right, master study, not copy, of Pierre-Auguste Renoir's portrait of actress Jean Samary. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. I'll put the spelling in the description there. So I went ahead and I put in the background because I felt like I needed to start with this really interesting brushy pink background so that the edges of the hair and the shoulders could melt into that pink background. I've been using the hair, the bangs from the top of her head to the hairline as increments of measuring. So from the bottom of her bangs, that brings us in the reference to the midline of her mouth. Okay, let me show you what that looks like. So I've been taking her bangs and then looking at how far down. So let's get a really good measurement here. Say about that. So that brings us to the midline of the mouth, and then from the midline of the mouth, I'd say her chin is about halfway in between this shape. So we can use the shape from the top of her head to the bottom of her bangs to figure out the height or length of her head. We can also take this unit of measure, turn it sideways, and see just how much width at the eyes we need. So we're at this highlight here. So that is about 1.5 times this mass. So we used it for the length of the face and the width of the face. All right, so now I'm going to treat this portrait as I would a selective start portrait. Even though I've already got some of the background and kind of the shapes and placement of the head worked out, we can double check that we have this kind of mapped out. So her mouth's pretty much shadowy, softly laid in just about the right spot. And then her chin is looking like it's about in the middle of that mass, so I think that's correct. And we're going to look at the width, so about right here to right there, and that's in the center of the mass. So I think what we have blocked in here is pretty close. The interesting thing with this study is the really rough brushwork that Renoir is using. So I'm going to use a really rough brush. You can see that it's just splayed out nicely. And I'm going to start with this beautiful yellow forehead shape on the left side of the forehead. So we know Renoir is kind of utilizing the zones of the face, if you will. And we know from past portraits that the forehead tends to be a more golden or have a little more yellow in it than the center and the lower part of the face. And Renoir's really working with that thought, so we will too. And in this little corner right here, I see this kind of orangey brown shape. So let's just mix up that color. I think it's about right there. And we'll put that in. Bangs transition softly into the forehead color. And there's this interesting orangey brush mark right about here. Now this is a master study, so I'm not trying to copy it exactly. When I'm finished, what I hope to accomplish is at least have you feel like it's a Renoir. So one of the viewers that watches my channel asked me to do this master study. So that's why we're doing this today. I feel like we need a little darker value right here at that opening of the hair on the forehead. You want the forehead to look like it's tucked. It's tucking up under the hair, not bumping into it. So that has to be softly, softly transitioned into. So we can work with a few back and forth, light and dark strokes that will build up the form of the forehead. So I know usually with selective start, I start with an eye, one of the features, like an eye, a nose. I've started with the mouth in the past, but today we're starting with the forehead because we already had that hair mass, and I like to work, you know, from one feature to the next. So the hair mass is considered a feature. So we're just gonna work our way down. It almost looks like this is a pastel, but it's not, it's an oil painting. So the left side of the forehead has quite a bit of light hitting it. There's absolutely no blending going on in this portrait. So I mixed my palette before I started the painting, because that's how I do with selective start. I like to mix up a few lights, a few mid values, and a few darker colors. And then I tend to build more colors as I paint, depending on what I need. But it's a good way to have some established piles that helps me just keep painting and moving along. I don't want to have to mix every single brush stroke. I don't know, I'd rather spend the time before I start painting. That way I can enjoy the painting process more without too much mixing going on. Let's get this little lock of hair. It's kind of a warm brown. And it's coming down, kind of in line with the center of her face and her nose. So I want to make sure I line it up. I am working on canvas paper, which is really textured. It's not my favorite surface, but I didn't have a oil primed canvas board, which I would have preferred to use. So it's a little different for me. However, I think this really rough texture of the canvas paper is going to work out nicely with the rough looking texture of this portrait. A warm yellowy brown. There's a little highlight catching right here. So the highlights in her bangs makes a little C shape, like an upside down C shape. And we don't want to stray from that too much. So we just keep our highlights in that shape. I'm trying to see them as masses. I don't want to be painting individual hairs. That is not what Renoir did. It's not really, it doesn't work to have too much individual hair strands in a portrait, unless you're going for super high photorealism, but not in this case. I love her hair, it's so fun. So I guess I could look up some of the details around his subject. She was an actress, we can see that. I don't know that much about her other than Renoir painting her. I was aware of the painting before I was asked to do the master study, but I hadn't really paid much attention to Renoir prior to this. So I've got the highlights in a pretty good place. We can come back to that and adjust them if we need to. So I just want to catch that this piece of hair, her bangs, are kind of turning under away from the light. So we're going to darken this little mass right here where it's coming into the forehead on the right side. So I'm thinking about mark making when I'm putting the brush to the canvas paper and trying to not blend. Just lay down some nice marks and leave them alone. Let's see, now we need some eyebrows. So there's like a darker pink color under the brownish top color of her eyebrows. So let's work with the pink so it's a color that's we can easily manipulate, not too dark, not too light. We'll see if we can't put I'll see if, I don't know why I keep saying we. I'm gonna see if I can get these eyebrows in the right place, and then we'll do some measuring and see how I did. When I do my more formal portrait work, I like to have a 1-to-1 ratio with at least the face of the portrait. That way, whatever I have on the computer screen, I can use my proportion tool and measure that out and know for certain things are in the right place. But I like to eyeball it first. I think it's a good way to train yourself to see shape and proportion and placement, and that way you're not relying all the time on, having to use tools to measure. But it's nice to be certain, and then you can move on, because if these eyebrows are not in the right place, then everything below them will be off. So she's got a tiny angle, so I think we're sticking with the angle correctly. And once I get the eyebrows placed in this pink color, I'm going to stand back. So we've been pretty close to the canvas for a while now, so then I'll take a moment, stand back, look at what we've got placed, and decide if it looks correct. I feel like maybe this outer edge is a little low. We'll just raise it up. It's kind of like sculpting. You can just carve out certain things. To do a little carve out of the end of the right eyebrow. This side of the face looks like it has a shadow, so we don't want to use anything too light when we're carving and manipulating the shapes here in that shadow side. So now I'm going to grab some of this like indigo blue color, believe it or not. So I see a little bit of that, and we're going to get some darker notes in. Okay. I don't know the exact palette that Renoir used, but I just put together my palette based on what I could see here. I am using a color that I don't work with very much. This Rose D'Or, D-O-R-E, Dore. Have you guys used it before? It's new to me. It's very transparent, I see. I think it will be helpful for starting, you know, any area that has a lot of pink in it, like her nostrils, her mouth. I mean, we could start it with that rose door, but it won't be strong enough to finish it off. So I mixed up a little black pile here. It's made of the ultramarine blue, the viridian green, and some little touch of the transparent oxide brown. So I'm just gonna darken the left eyebrow's inner part just a little. I don't go crazy. And we'll see how that looks. I feel like it's pretty good. I'm gonna put in the right dark, and it looks like there's mostly just the right eyebrow has this small bit of dark patch right here in the main part of the eyebrow, closer to the center. Mauve shadow color on the side, the right side of her face. I'm going to grab a little more of it and just restate that. Moving into the right hairline. I'm going to have to mix up some more of my hair color maybe. That darker bit. I feel like there's some flesh shadow color going right up here in this right, like making a little up area in the corner there. So this portrait has a lot of saturated color, which I love working with, gotta say. Normally, I always feel like I'm using way too much saturation. That is something that I have to be careful with. I have a tendency to oversaturate my flesh, but knowing that's half the battle. So I always watch out for it. But I don't think I'm gonna have to worry about that in this portrait. Squeeze out some more of this rose. I've used a ton of it already. It's so transparent, it's crazy. So I'm going to get a little of the shadow color. I see it's making this left eye socket. It's got some mauves in it. It's got some orange in it. Some peach. I'm starting with the mid values first. I don't want to do anything too crazy, too permanent of a mark yet. So there's no dramatic lighting in this portrait, which is nice. So we're working more with temperatures and a little bit of value change, but more with temperature, I'd say. All right, let's get a little orange, a little darker orange here, and attempt the upper eyelid on the left eye. So I'm looking at the distance between the eyebrow, making sure I have enough of that upper eyelid showing. And we're gonna put in some marks to indicate where we think we're gonna go. Nothing's set in stone yet. We can always adjust, but I need something in place to work with. I'm so tempted to get a less splayed out brush, but everything in my fibers and my being is telling me to stick with this brush because it just really is lending itself to the texture and look of this Renoir. Just looking at how the shapes and the colors are kind of connecting towards the eyebrow and that upper eyelid. I think what I want to do is I want to take this mid-value pink and just make the shape of her eye very softly. And then when I paint those darks into it, they'll just kind of melt into it all. Plus there's a really white highlight in the corner of that left eye, and making this a little darker will help that to pop. So I'm taking some of this mauve color and darkening the whites of the eye, because what do we know? The whites of the eye are never white. That's what we know. This little line making her eyelid. I'm trying to get it with this brush, and this, between this brush and the texture of that paper, I don't know. I'm gonna keep with it. I'm gonna keep with it. I think we can pull it out. I have a feeling if I get a more controlled brush, we'll get too tight and we'll lose the beautiful idea behind the brushwork. So I'm not gonna let it frustrate me. I'm gonna push through it. So you can see there's a nice shadow underneath. So it looks like the light's kind of a little bit from above. Okay, let's put the other eye in and I think we'll have a better judge, but the left eye by itself seems to be okay at the moment. Once we know it's pretty good to go, then we can carve it out and make it a little more detailed. I like this peachy shadow color on the right side of her nose. So I'm gonna put that shadow shape in to help me gauge where the right eye is going to land. Shadow shapes are so helpful to, help you see and understand where to place features. We can even put a little bit of that underneath plane of the nose in, which is also the ear, about right there. I just want to make sure we've got the left side of her face wide enough, because that's going to help us judging the placement of the right eye and the nose. Everything helps everything else. It looks like Renoir's brush marks go in the direction of, modeling the form. They are very rough and brushy on the face even. He just left the entire portrait rough and not smoothed out, which I like. Her nose does not come too wide, so we don't want to have it too far out onto the cheek here. And there's a beautiful light shape of flesh color carving out that left nostril. So we can do that as well to help us solidify the left side of the nose. So here's our right nostril, somewhere about right here, I'm thinking. And it works, its color sort of lightens and goes right up the right side of the nose and into the underplane, into that eye socket shadow. Even in these small little areas like the tip of the nose, you can see Renoir's brush strokes are following the form. So there's this really beautiful kind of saturated yellow highlight on the bridge of the nose here. And then it gets a little bit lighter and less saturated on the tip of the nose right here. Trying not to do blending. I'm loving all the pink and red in this nose. It's so pretty. So let's try a nostril placement. I'm gonna have to use some reddish pink. That rose door is so transparent. I can't get it to make a really solidified mark. But when I mix it with the Cad Red light that I have on my palette, it makes a nice color, reddish pink color. We're just putting those down, and we can carve them and shape them a little bit more with the pink color that surrounds the nostrils. You put some marks down, you take some marks away, you put some more down, and you just keep going back and forth until you're happy. Okay, I'm thinking those are a bit high. So let's just push them down. So let's use our hair mask. I'd say we're there. Artists understood, even in Renoir's time, how light goes through the nose, and it's a beautiful area to use a lot of red in because of that. So much capillaries and blood flow that's close to the surface, and so when light travels through, everything just glows red. Dark pink, red, reddish orange. All right, let's attempt the right eye. So we're going to start at the eyebrow. We're going to look at the eyebrow, and we're going to make this upper eyelid mark. So her eyes line up with one another. So if we look at drawing a line straight across, just about there is where we want that upper eye, the upper lash line to be. I'm going to use some of this mauve color to fill in the iris. Nothing too dark. It'll help me carve this eye into the face. Still using this crazy brush. It's very rough. So this eye is more in shadow, it appears, so we don't want to go too light with anything. There are a couple of lighter, a little bit of a highlight right here under the brow. The eyelid crease, I can't do it with that brush. I just can't. I tried. The edge of the pupil and iris line up with the edge, the outer edge of her right nostril. And then they come across and line up with the left eye. I like how the outer edges of her eyes kind of aim downward. So I'm trying to make sure we capture that. Some pretty blue throughout the eye. It'll pop when we get this pupil in. And the edge of the iris. Just like a pinky brown color, making the line there at the inner corner of that right eye. So we're going to work on these eyes for a few minutes and make sure that they look good before we venture further down the face. So I'm going to look at the width of her right eye and compare it to the left eye, and they do match. So if we are looking at that left eye compared to that right eye, they're pretty much the same size, and there should be an eye width of space between the two. His is a little less than eye width, Renoir's is. So I think we're okay. I needed to put that highlight in so I could see if I'm getting this dark pupil mass dark enough. I couldn't tell until I put the highlight in. I'm not blending, I am just laying down the little shape of color that I see. All right, we're working on the mouth. And I am still using this crazy brush. It's really splayed out. Make sure we capture that really beautiful dark reddish center bit of the mouth on the upper lip. All right, let's get a little bit of this bottom lip highlight in here. Tucks over here on this left side as well. Like we need a little bit more to the bottom right of her mouth. I feel like this right corner of her mouth just flicks. Let's just aim it up a little bit higher, like that, and we can carve out around. That lines up the center of her iris pupil, which is just about where we are. There's a nice highlight right underneath here. So we put some in, we take some out. It's a little back and forth. That's how we do it. And the brush strokes seem to follow the form around to her hand, which is resting against her face. Oh, we never put in the cheek color on the left. That may be what's kind of throwing me. So let's put it in. Yeah, that's better. It's like lines of cheek color. I mean, he hasn't blended it at all, which is pretty cool. So this darkest mass on this left eyebrow is pretty much right over the iris and pupil. So I'm just moving a little bit to the left. So I'm just kind of restating some of the areas that we've already done, but it'll just help solidify and kind of reshape where they go. So I feel like she's looking off to the left and she should be looking at us. So that means we need to carve out a little bit more on the left side of the iris. Let's get her looking at us. There we go. Now she's back. Stand back and take a look. We are going to loosely attempt to indicate this hand, which is just about this much space between her mouth and this line indicating her pinky. And then it comes around and down. And there is a mauve shadow color here, just underneath the center line of her nose and mouth. And that's all worked in with some of this dark pink purple colors, some of this orange. It's almost like working with sunset colors. And there's like a little bit of a dark shape here. I think it's indicating a touch of hair peeking out from underneath her ear. Like that. There we go. And then there is some gold color indicating this thumb kind of tucking back underneath her chin a little bit. there's just some crazy, looks like random brushwork here in the left side of her chest and shoulders. And we need to indicate, which I want to do with a dark pink, this shape of her pinky. It's kind of straight and then starts to bend about right here, and then her hand comes back this way. So it's down, over, down, and then there's some shadow shape on the right side of her, oops, that's a lot, of her arm. Okay. So I want to indicate this bracelet, which is showing up about right here. Looks like it's got some little green gems on it, and then there's some highlight happening. There's no blending, we're just lightly dabbing. That'll work, and then there's some highlight, so let's see if we can't just elegantly apply that. And we're going to work some of this flesh color into the hand. And it looks like he's got a little reflective green in this finger right about here. So we'll just do the same. And then to put that ring in. I really love the way he's just hinting at this being a hand. Oops. A little bit of a highlight catching right here on the edge of her hand, and we can play that right into a highlight on her chin here, and the tip of the nose. A little ring right about here. And he's got this pretty light highlight going right up through it like that. And use a little of this pink just to help soften that transition of the outer edge of it into her finger. And then we're going to get into some of that dress, which is going to be nice. So let's grab some of this green, and it goes right underneath her bracelet. And up and over that shoulder. So I'm putting down some dark marks, putting down some light marks on top of it, just kind of going back and forth. Very loose brushwork. It gets a little bit darker as it dips into this underneath that arm part. All right, we're gonna finish up her dress. Let's move this over a little bit. So this left arm is back in space so it's not catching the light like the other arm is. So we're just going to indicate that like so. A little bit of flesh color in there. So this canvas is a little bit different than the initial Renoir, but we were able to get the basic idea of our master copy with this shape. I think it's, what is it, 12 by 16 is what I'm working on. I think I like painting like Renoir. I love all the loose sketchiness. I know a lot of people don't concern themselves with the clothing on master studies, but I enjoy attempting to paint it. Swirls of green happening throughout. Color in here. And I feel like it's her. You guys can let me know what you think. It was fun. Let's look at her hair. Let's just make some dark notes here. Just a few finishing notes. Maybe her mouth is a tiny bit wide. It comes to the center of this eye, but I feel like I want to just tone it down a little bit. And just push that upper lip some. Let's see. Doesn't have really a dark corner happening, but just want to see if we can push it a little bit. This eyebrow is a bit low, appears to me. Let's push it up. Maybe that's what's messing me up. Should I quit while I'm ahead? Maybe just this little flick there. All right, so there you have it, your Renoir master study.